On July 27th, 1998, we're in Stonewood, West Virginia, heading towards my grandmother's house, who's Mildred P. Musrock, to hear the story of her life.
Well,
Tell me your name.
I'm Mildred Musrock. Maiden name was Babiak, and I was born January 8, 1915, in a village between Krakow and Częstochowa in Poland. And this was told to me that my mother sailed from the United States in 1914, and I was born May the 10th, and I was born January the 8th, so that she must have not known that she was expecting a baby when she sailed to Poland. And then the Bolshevik Revolution broke out then, and there was a lot of fighting started just like over a couple of days' notice. The fighting started, and then after that they thought they were getting settled up, and then the First World War started, and it started in that part of the country again, so it was all war from then on. And when I was only a couple of weeks old, the home was burned up by those Bolsheviks then, and they had to dig caves along a creek and live in those caves till the war subsided, and then they were able to go back to rebuild. And it was, don't remember any of that, but my mother said that's what caused her, killed her in the long run, that was just too much of a hardship for her. And then
What did she die of?
She came to, we came to the United States then in 1920. And I remember getting on the Ellis Island and coming into Template, and one midnight rainy night, and
You saw the Statue of Liberty when you came in?
That was when we were getting off the ship. My mother woke us up early one morning and said, but we were all going to America with great expectations. And so the people were on the deck, some were kneeling, crying, praying, and they said, look at the statue. And I just looked. It was foggy, the ship's horn was blowing, so to me it didn't mean much. I just saw a little gray speck. I couldn't make out what it was, and I just went along with whatever. And anyways, they at Ellis Island, they took us out to get checked or examined, so my mother went with me, and Mike went by himself because he was then, he was about 9 years old then. So
And how old were you?
I was 6 and a half.
6 and a half.
And he would be about 10 years old then, because he's 4 years older than I am. And she brought me back and set me on the baggage. We didn't have no suitcase. It was just all a bunch of bags and baggages. And we saw in a sort of a dining area where everyone was grabbing they had hot rolls, butter, and milk. They were giving all the people that had got off the ship. And everyone was grabbing the food, and Mike come out and he says, come on, let's go and grab some of it, because that was like bread and something that it was, that we didn't get hardly any in Russia. We just either ate boiled wheat or wheat bread, and it was ground real rough, so the bread wasn't real tasty. And I says, no, Mom said for us to sit here and leave just be good kids and sit here till she got back. Well, when she finally came back, the kitchen was empty, the food was all gone. He said, see now, there's no food. And that lady motioned for us to come in, and she gave us a fresh plate of hot rolls and a jug of milk, aluminum jug of milk, and aluminum cups and a whole dish of butter. So we had a good meal, and then we started out. My mother was anxious to get, I guess, on the train, so we went. And I still remember that old smoky station. We got on the train right away, and this was all, we got off the ship at daybreak. It was just getting daylight. And this was about noon. We got on the train, and we got to Clarksburg, I'd say about midnight, around there. And she got a cab, and the cab she left all the baggage at the station. Cab took us as far as the tin mill. My dad worked at the Weirton Steel then. And we woke a family up, and they recognized my mother right away and made accommodations for us. And in the morning, my dad found out that we were there, and he didn't expect us, I don't think, till next day. And so from then on, we moved into a great big two-story house with Mr. Martin, and there were two other men that were living there with my dad in that big house. But so they made room for us, and that was the first pair of shoes. The store across the street, it was sort of a variety store there. They sold clothes and meat and canned goods and stuff of that sort.
So that stuff you didn't have in Poland? You didn't?
Never.
So this was
Never.
really living it up?
Everything was new. I'd never seen electric lights till after I got on a train, and I wondered,
oh my.
I kept wondering who lit all those lights, who was, that the train kept going, and that's still in Poland, and I was still wondering who in the world lit all those lights. I couldn't imagine. And I'd never gone up the steps more than 2 or 3, and I was scared to death of steps. It was new to me.
So you were in a 2-story home?
And anyways,
wow.
They put the shoes on me. I wouldn't take them off, ever take them off. I'd go to bed, but in the night, they'd take them off for me. In the morning, first thing, I'd put my shoes back on.
What kind of shoes were they?
Well, they were pretty shoes. The lady, they were kind of expecting us to come. She knew that we were coming. My dad had told me.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a pretty pair of shoes, patent leather bottom, and then sort of a cream-colored top trimmed in patent leather. And they were real pretty shoes. And I thought that was
Did they lace up or?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
The high. Yes.
You laced them all, tied them.
Those were in old days, and anyways, in about a couple of weeks, my dad took us uptown and to movies, and bought us all clothes. We all went on a shopping spree. I got a coat. Everything was too big because I was just skin and bone. And Mike too. Mike got a suit and dressed us all up. My mother got some clothes and took us to the movie, and it was a Western. And I know when they started shooting, Mike hid behind the seats, and I did too. I scooted down.
That was your first time to see movies?
We didn't know why.
Oh my.
It wasn't no talkies or anything, but we saw them shooting, so we just. The man was, I think it was in those days, was playing a piano or something in front there, but so we didn't hear the shooting, but
it was scary.
It was just scary to see it. I've never been to movies, and I remember the first time I tasted oranges. And oranges were sour in those days. They weren't sweet like they are now. I didn't like them. I didn't care. They brought bananas to me, and I just wondered. I says, am I eating the right part? The yellow peel looked nicer. So I started chewing on it, and it was not tasty either. And I didn't see what people were eating. Sugar, I didn't care for sugar because I've not tasted much sugar. I did taste they had honey in Europe, and that's about the only thing we had. And on the ship, we got some hard candy, and I enjoyed that. I liked it because it was flavored cherry. I think cherry flavored, different flavors. And
Do you remember the name of this ship?
Leopoldina.
Leopoldina.
Leopoldina,
And
And
you-
that ship, I think, it had one more voyage after it went back to Europe, and had one more voyage, and then it sank.
Oh my.
And I don't know if people sank on it or not, but
It was an
there
old
was a
ship.
talk that we'd all been
Dead.
dead. And
What
anyways,
port did it leave from? It left from Germany?
it went from France, Le Havre,
Lee Harbor.
from France. I
So
know
you
that.
had to go from Krakow
Oh yeah, by train. We went in boats.
in boats.
Somehow we crossed. I don't know it all, but I know I thought, well, I'm in America already because we got on a
Oh.
boat. I think we went across a bay somewhere, and or Gulf, and anyways.
And they had to put you in the wagon to hide you?
Oh well, that was in Poland.
That was
Yeah,
getting out of
yeah.
Poland.
Yeah, when they were taking me to get me out of Poland to get me to the United States because I was born there, so I
Mhm.
wasn't allowed to leave.
Mm.
Or they had strict rules then, especially with those Bolsheviks, which later was communism.
Mm-hmm.
But you paid, like you had to kind of buy yourself out from everything.
Mm.
And I wasn't allowed out of Poland, so my uncle put me on a wagon. And we left early one morning and all that day, and then we stopped in the night and let the horse rest, and then next morning we started out again, and I'd say it was about like noon when we got in Germany,
Then you were
and
safe.
from where we started. And so
That was a
I
long.
guess I got ahead of
Then you
myself.
started school here.
Oh, yeah.
What grade did they start you in?
Well, they started me in first grade, and I didn't know a word in American.
What was your name? Was it Mildred in Poland?
And it was Emilia,
Amelia.
but I didn't.
Sure.
When I went to Alquipa after my mother died, I had to go to live with my aunt.
Mm-hmm.
I was in third grade then, and I thought, oh, I didn't like Millie at all, Emilia, and everyone was calling me Millie. I thought, well, I'm going to change it to Mildred, and that's when I changed it.
American
Uh,
sounding name.
And but
So when you started school, you couldn't speak.
a word in American, and there was a girl in back of me that understood me, and so I was forever talking to her.
She could
And-
speak Polish like you.
Yeah,
Oh.
she same nationality, and so she was talking to me, and I got sent out in a home for talking. Well, I didn't know what it was all about, and the principal come along and gave me said something to me which I didn't understand, and he gave me a cough drop. I'll never forget, a black Smith Brother cough drop. And I stood there and I looked at the fountain. It fascinated me that water could come out of something like that, so I went to the fountain, did step on the thing, water squirted out, took a drink of water, and I thought, I better go home. So it was a cold, sleety day, and I went home. And home was about a half mile away from the school. And just with my dress, my coat was at school.
Oh my.
And so in those days, no one had phones. So the principal sent a couple girls over to find out if I was home. They looked everywhere for
Oh
me.
gosh.
And then they could come back and said, yes, I went home. And the next day, he put me in another room with another teacher, and she paid a little more attention to me. And so
She taught you English then,
Uh,
slowly?
she had a daughter in my class, Mrs. McGregor, and her daughter was very nice. She sat with me and would point things out to me, and by end of the school year, I was able to talk. And
Wow.
for Christmas play, they even put me in a play for Christmas. And I didn't know how to talk, but I had a line to say, and I learned to say it. They said, now speak loud, and I knew to speak loud. And I get whether I said it right or not, but everyone laughed.
Aw.
So I thought, well, I was in. And Mike said, well, they laughed at you. And I says, no, they didn't. They liked what I said.
Aw. Do you remember the name of the school?
Summit Park.
Oh.
It was Despard then. It's Summit
Despard.
Park now, but it was
Summit.
Despard school then.
Okay.
And they didn't have, I don't know how many, I think they only had 8th grade then, but later on they had the 9th grade there.
Did you celebrate Christmas in Poland, or was this something
Oh,
you...
yeah, it was a big celebration in Poland.
Oh.
Christmas, my lands, yes. The kids got to eat things that they didn't get to eat any. They would take out the dried fruit. That's one time we had honey, and they'd bake some kind of things and drizzle with honey, and that was tasty. And nuts, all kind of nuts would come in. And
So after the war quieted down, then you had another home and
well,
a little bit of...
things began coming in. My uncle was a professor, so there was a schoolroom right next to built on right to the house. But there were only about, I'd say 14, 15 children who would come to school in that village, from that village. Every kid had a chore to do. Kids went out to watch cows and take care of things, work in the fields. No one chop wood. And,
Did you go to school? Did he teach you?
I had to go in. Well, you might as well say I just sat there.
Yeah. And listened.
I and my cousin, she was same age, Julia. The older kids, once in a while they'd be in class, and other times they'd have things to do, chores to do, animals to feed and take care of outside. But and in summer everyone was busy, so there wasn't much schooling, but whatever school. The only thing my uncle had to teach, by then he had to teach Polish and Russian, so I didn't grasp either one very much, but I could make out the Polish alphabet is almost like the American, but the different sounds. Now Russian alphabet was altogether different, but trying to learn two of them, why it was. But my numbers, I knew my numbers real good, so they put me in first grade, and I did fine.
You were bright.
And I did.
And what high school did you go to then here? You graduated?
I didn't graduate from high school. I went to Victory just 1 year, my sophomore year, and then I got married because the mill, my aim was to be a teacher, and by then I was doing fine. And but the Weirton Steel was leaving town, and my dad was going to be out of work. He was about the last man that left with the Weirton Steel, and when he left,
he was a foreman, or he had a position?
He was a millwright.
Millwright.
Oh, in fact, he lived at the mill, I'd say, because there was no 40-hour week then, and there'd be days that we wouldn't see him at all. He'd be at the mill. He and a couple other men practically run that factory. In fact, he come in with the people that opened the Weirton Steel here in Clarksburg from Monessen, and he was one of the men that they brought in, so he knew a little bit about the steel mills. And I think Mr. Morgan Steel was the company he used to work before. And
so do you remember what year that was that they went out?
No, I don't know. I didn't keep track of the years, but
But they left.
It just, and Weirton Steel left then, and I was just married. Oh, I got married in 1930. 1930. And
Okay, so that must have been about the time.
And
Your father
right
left.
after that, the Weirton still left, and my dad moved on to Weirton, and I stayed on.
You didn't want to go to Weirton?
Well, I was married.
Oh, you got married
I
already.
got married at 16.
So you had to stay.
16 and a half, and I got married because in those days I didn't know what else to do, and it seems like I was in a way or something.
Yeah.
Because after my mother brought me to my dad, a man that I'd never seen before, a complete stranger, and I don't know, every time he'd get drunk, he'd say I wasn't his daughter.
Aww,
And
yeah.
after I got to be so old, I knew that it was something like I was in a way or something, and after he got married. But I had a very good stepmother. My stepmother.
What was her name?
Mary.
Mary.
And
She took
she kind of took up for me all the time, but and she told me, she says, now don't get married. But I says, oh yeah, I'm going to get married. Get out of the
house.
Yeah, get out of the house. But
where did you meet Stephen Musrock?
I didn't go out to meet anyone. I was just a happy girl, had a lot of friends, had good, and my girlfriend, her dad played in the orchestra, and so we went around to dances, and so I was a pretty good dancer, because every time her dad would play for dance,
what kind of dancing did they do?
Old polkas, Stardust, the Hungarian dances, and foxtrot, and the waltz, and it was no jitterbug or anything else in those days, waltz and foxtrot. So I was a very happy person. And anyways, but I thought, well, he seems like everywhere I go, he would be there. There he was.
Wasn't he a nice dresser, you said?
Well, he had come in from Ohio, and it seems like all the girls were after him. And I just thought, well, heck, I didn't really care for him. But after he started paying attention to me, I thought, well, gee whiz, who am I that to say no? So
made you feel special.
Yeah, made me feel a little special. Well, I found out later on that he had a drinking problem.
Right.
And many other things.
So you were young, and then
because he had left home when he was, I think he said when he was 17, and so he had come back to after his dad died to be with his mother, and it seems like all the girls seems like, oh, he was someone special, but
they didn't live with him.
But well.
And then you had a daddy right away. You had a child.
Yeah, I had married the first year. I was exactly married a year. I had your dad, and then
1932.
2 years later I had Mary Ann, and then I didn't have any children until Mary Ann was 6 years old when Danny was born, and he had already had a stroke. He was sick, and he abused himself with drinking, and it was
he was in bed 2 years.
We had built a home here. We had built this place here. He had bought this place when he was out drinking, and he come home. We were saving for our home. I wanted a home so bad, and because it seems like we rented places, but there was never even good drinking water in the pump. We always had to go to the neighbors to get my drinking water, but usually had good water to wash clothes in and wash dishes and all that. But here he comes home one night and he says, I bought the Oak Grove in Stonewood.
Oak Grove? That's
Oak
what this
Grove
was
is
called.
what this was called. And he kept paying on it, and I thought, well, what's he paying? And no deed or anything. And so finally I went up to the courthouse to find out about it, and here it was up for taxes. So I knew a fella that worked there at the office, a young kid that I had gone to school with. And he says, well, I'll find out about the place. I showed him. He got the map up and I showed him where I thought it was. And so he wrote to the company, and about a week later we got a letter, and here it belonged to the Centuryland Company, and they were wanting to get rid of it for taxes. So there was over $500 worth of taxes. In those days, you could buy a lot for $100, $200 anywhere in Stonewood.
Right.
It was just land.
Yeah.
And this was a 3-acre tract. And they said they were willing to sell it for $1,000. So I come home and I told Steve, I says, it's up for taxes. And for $1,000, the Centuryland Company will sell it to us. And here he was paying a fella, Mr. Board or someone, Senator Board they called him. And he was paying him money to look into it. And that man was just taking the money and keeping it himself. So we paid $1,000 down. And then, here, I looked in the paper, taxes weren't paid. He says, my gosh, you told me they were supposed to pay the taxes when we bought the land. And here the place is up for sale again. And so I went up to the courthouse and they says, no, they made a mistake. But I got a black eye out of it.
Oh.
And because he said, you don't do things,
I guess
don't look into things.
Women didn't do things like that back then.
No.